Chapter 14, Total Eclipse. Methinks it should be now a huge eclipse of sun and moon, and that the affrighted globe should yawn at alteration. Othello, Act 5, Scene 2. Passing the burning moon, we sped towards the planet, which was moving in her orbit at the rate of 75,000 miles an hour. Our car, flying more than 5 times faster, soon came near and drew up within 20,000 miles of her, opposite the dark side of her hemisphere, she being in inferior conjunction, or nearly on a line between us and the sun, which was about 67 million miles distant. The transits of Venus across the sun, having relation as they do to one of the most important problems of astronomy, i.e., the determination of our Earth's exact distance from the luminary, are looked forward to with the greatest of interest by our terrestrial astronomers, and government expeditions are sent out to various parts of the globe for the purpose of making correct observations of this important planetary phenomenon. And we were certainly in the most favorable situation for observing it. "We will now witness a total eclipse of the sun by Venus," said Asterion. "Of all the phenomena in nature ever seen by man, a total eclipse of the sun is the most grand and imposing. The extraordinary appearance of the skies, the changes of color in all natural objects, the reduction of temperature, the gathering darkness, the funereal and often ghastly aspects of the landscape, the magnificent and wonderful appearance of the sun with its flaming columns, upshooting pillars and jets of fire, its rosy sierra, crimson photosphere, and golden corona, the general solemnity felt by all observers, the loudly expressed terrors of almost all barbarous races, the fears and frequent outcries of birds and animals, and what is even still more impressive, the swift and awful rush of the moon's black shadow across continents and oceans, like some vast demon of night borne on wings of darkness, all attest the sublimity of the phenomenon. But a total eclipse, or rather occultation of the sun by one of the planets witnessed by an observer, is in the interplanetary space, and within 20,000 miles of it, is a phenomenon so awful and fraught with such unspeakable horrors as would make the blood of any man who witnessed it almost freeze in his veins. In a few moments the great black disk of the planet, nearly 8,000 miles in diameter, and from our position appearing more than 200 times larger than the full moon, began to move slowly across the sun, step by step, carving or gouging out, as it were, a huge semicircle excavation right into the very bowels of the luminary, until it almost seemed, according to the superstitious terrors of certain barbarous races, as if some gigantic aerial monster was actually devouring the fountain of light. Soon we were immersed in its umbria, an immense black cone of stretching hundreds of thousands of miles in space. None of the usual phenomenon attending eclipse seen on Earth appeared, but in an instant the great solar luminary was utterly blotted out, and in place of it a huge gulf, black as ink, and apparently more than 1,000,000 miles across, was hollowed out in the celestial vault right in front of us, its vast mouth sweeping above, beneath, and all around us. It is impossible to describe the horror of the scene. It seemed as if we were sinking into an infinite abyss, swallowed up in a vacuum of absolute nothingness, prefiguring the bottomless pit of perdition, the dreadful realm of outer darkness, into which the rebellious angels and damned spirits of wicked men are forever doomed at the day of judgment. The aspect of the burning world wrapped in whirlwinds of flame was almost cheerful compared with this, for it had light, although infernal, but this was the darkness of death itself, the Erebus of annihilation. An overwhelming horror seemed to seize us. John trembled. Altiphora and the doctor grew pale, while the spirilla countenance of Asterion had an expression of triumph like some mighty magician who had called up the tremendous scene. "Move on, in heaven's sake," said Altiphora. "The sight is too awful to look upon." "After a few trips, your highness will become accustomed to it," said Asterion. In a short time Venus completed her transit, and the sun again shone forth in all its glory. "Captain," asked Burrus, "shall we go ahead?" "Yes, at double speed." Burris moved the lever, and we flew faster than ever, taking the cosmic stream towards Jupiter, and reaching the intersection on the second day we took the Martian stream. "We shall now make 10 million miles per day," said Asterion. "How far off is Mars?" I asked. 6 million miles. "We should reach him in 6 days?" "In less time than that." On the evening of the second day we had made 20 million miles. "Now, gentlemen," said Asterion, "we are approaching that neutral point between our respective planets where Earth's attraction ceases and that of Mars begins. In our previous journeys we have shot by that point. I will now slacken up speed and approach gradually. When we reach it, you will witness some interesting phenomenon." Burroughs carefully checked the batteries of the car and slowed up. "What's our speed now?" "Almost fast as our hand of your watch." "At that rate, in a day's journey, we could make it nearly 5 inches." "We must approach very carefully. The variation of a single hair's breadth could throw us beyond the line," replied he, consulting an instrument which registered distance and space to the minuteness of a spider's thread, while Burroughs closely watched the register of his machine. In a few moments the faint tinkling of a bell sounded from the instrument. "Halt!" whispered Asterion. Burroughs touched a key, and the car paused.